The Little Mermaid and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and why Hollywood and the Hollywood press is wrong to blame racism for the Little Mermaid bombing in China. So right now, they're blaming racist backlash for the Little Mermaid getting what they call doused in China and South Korea, and they're saying, well, it's because they did a racisms there in those countries. But the problem is
doing a racism.
They did a racism, but the problem is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse stars an Afro-Latino character.
So they did a misogyny, is what they did.
Yes, this time they did a misogyny. There's always that's the progressive stack, right? There's always something.
Well, there's it's intersectional. It's probably a racist misogyny.
So the Little Mermaid in China made $3.6 million in 10 days, which is really, really bad. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse made $17.2 million in just its first weekend, and it's the strongest international market that movie has.
Now that's more.
Yes,
right.
That is a 17.2 is more than 3.6.
Good.
Yes,
perfect. Before jumping to it just possibly being, I haven't seen it, but I've heard it was.
Yeah,
I've heard mixed reviews, and I don't really trust anybody at this point. But there's also I think they might be missing the fact that this is like a story that Europeans are very familiar with, Europeans and Americans, via our ancestry. Hans Christian Andersen, I mean, is a household name for European Americans and Europeans. Yep. The Little Mermaid is Hans Christian Andersen. We're accustomed to it. We're ready for it. In China, when The Little Mermaid came out, I don't think they were allowed to see American movies.
Yeah.
And they don't have the tradition of Hans Christian Andersen in their homes. So I think there's also a possibility that like this one just didn't do well because they didn't care.
They probably just wanted to eat it.
Yeah, like, oh no, wait. I should not have agreed so readily.
Oh man. But here's the other thing, like Fast and the Furious 10 did well in China, and that has an extremely diverse cast. It has nothing to do with racism there.
There are certain times though, like the Star Wars posters where they 100%
that's the marketing
did minimize. Yeah, I know.
Though. That's there's the Star Wars poster, but then we did that same controversy came up with the Little Mermaid where they got blamed for that, and then it turned out that there was it was just an IMAX poster that released both here and in China, right?
Yeah.
So, but they're very quick to blame it, to blame a movie bombing on something like that. But what they fail to realize is it's much simpler than that. Tell new stories that people don't have something to compare it to, where it feels like something's being taken from them, and people will more readily flock to it. And that's not even a one-to-one comparison here, because Miles Morales is kind of the unique character that has been what people would call tokenized, as in like he's not Peter Parker, but people still gravitate towards Miles Morales and really like him, even though that's the exception and not the rule.
Is he a different kind of character than Peter, or is he still the kind of a little nerdy kind of? I would characterize him as different. I saw Into the Spider-Verse. I haven't seen Across the Spider-Verse yet. He's not the same thing as especially not the same thing as the Peter Parker that has been portrayed on screen. So, but that's the thing. Like, people will flock to stuff if it's good, but Hollywood just doesn't know how to make good stuff. Or at least they don't try hard enough to just make new things, which would get them more leeway.
And if you're gonna make a remake,
this is something that we see. I think that we see in video games and in a lot of places in creative, creative endeavors. People are not really putting the effort in to make new, creative, interesting stuff. I feel like there's a lot of people that are just like phoning it in, and I think a lot of it has to do with work ethic of younger people that are creators and stuff like that nowadays.
They don't mean like at the Hollywood production level.
And not just at the Hollywood production level, but I think that writers, people that would be 30, that could be writing for this kind of stuff. People that are working in video games and stuff like that. You see it a lot. You see video games coming out incomplete. The first 6 months is kind of like a beta. They have all kinds of patches. They're not releasing completed games with a lot of content anymore. And I think that has something to do with work ethic. And you see that attitude with people that
incredible.
are like, what was that?
Sorry.
I asked him how Street Fighter was going.
Incredible. It's the best.
So you think it's a work ethic thing?
I don't know that I think that, but I think that it's worth exploring that idea, because there's a lot of people, you see these TikToks of people that are like, oh, look at what I do at my high technology job, whatever it may be.
I eat and I
exactly, and you And if that is the culture that you're in, right? The high tech industries and stuff like that. If that's the culture that you're in, then there's not really a whole lot of motivation to be like, go get the job done because you want it to be awesome. The whole attitude of that whole thing is kind of like the quiet quitting. I'm not going to do extra for this big company. If I'm working for a company that's owned by Microsoft or that's owned by Xbox or whatever, it's like there's not a lot of.
I think there's a lot of validity in what you're saying, but also I think something that's attributing to the phenomenon of everything being a remake is that digital marketing is an incredible phenomenon for marketing, because in the past, marketing would only be measured by sales, physical presence, and conjecture. And honestly, mostly conjecture. But now, especially in newspapers, because you would buy the front cover, you could assure that it would be seen. Mm-hmm. But if you're on page 17, you're really betting on an educated basis that's reading the newspaper thoroughly from top to bottom,
which is not how it usually goes.
Not usually, and not how you're taught traditionally to understand your consumer and marketing. But I think a lot of what's happening is, given to digital marketing, now we have statistics for literally everything. Yep. We have statistics for views, vanity metrics, which are likes, shares, follows, hearts, whatever. And I think that is both a gift and a curse, because we have people digitizing old media like Batman, Star Wars, and whatever. And now they can objectively see, so it got this many views on release, it got this many views after a week, it got this much money. And so the finance guys in collaboration with the marketing guys is like, this is the direction that we're going. Never taking into consideration that, you can say that Batman sells, or you can say that a cleverly written protagonist with like a detective twist sells. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so that's what I think is happening a lot with, I think, movies more so than video games, because in video games I feel like people are begging for the remakes, whereas in
it does feel that way, doesn't it?
Yeah,
like,
whereas
people are very excited about the remakes whenever we get a new, whether it's Final Fantasy, whether it's Resident Evil,
Knights of the Old Republic.
I would say that a lot of it actually has to do with, to me, I believe that the people who make these remakes, they only seek legitimacy in characters that already exist. And to what you were saying about whether it's laziness, I think that's because the people that are working at these corporations don't have the same approach to the creative endeavors that somebody who's making their own content does. So somebody who's created his own, think of Five Nights at Freddy's. Like there was more of a hunger, or like any of these properties where it's something that eventually gets bought out by a larger property. There's more of a hunger in the production process early on, because that's your baby. You want it to come out exactly the way you want to. But once you start having a soulless corporation putting it to market, then you can only expect so much motivation from a jumble of people with different motives. Also, I think that there's a lack of faith in stuff that is new IP. So like you say, Batman or Detective Story, I would say Spider-Man is proving pretty consistently now to be the greatest comic book character of all time. I would say him and Batman are the ones that have the most
neck and neck,
the most ability to draw in audiences. But the Batman didn't break box office numbers, but Spider-Man No Way Home did.
But I want to build on that. Because something that Batman and Spider-Man both have is that they're deeply imperfect characters. Batman loses everything he loves constantly. And he's a broken man trying to unbreak the world, right? And Peter Parker, in his real life, he's a loser. Like, he's always broke, he depends on his poor old aunt, and like he never
his hot aunt, you mean, in the
well, yeah.
New ones.
Well, in the new ones.
Yes. And he can never catch a break professionally. But now in the culture, in the cultural zeitgeist, everyone is this perfect cultural warrior that has the correct opinions about everything. So there really isn't this character that's fighting an internal battle. And if he's fighting an internal battle, it's because of something outside of his control, according to progressives, is that he is white, therefore he is racist, thus that is his battle. Like So essentially, every character is the same. So even if we didn't have a remake, everything would be a remake because every single person would have the same moral quality.
I think there's a lot to that. Every character is the same. You do not, if you are not allowed to talk about personality traits that are objectionable, then you're not really able to create a rich character that is interesting, that might have motivations for these bad things that make them compelling. Like, you can take a good guy and make them have bad traits, and that will make
Tony
them
Stark.
more interesting. Yeah, it's exactly. Tony Stark's an alcoholic. You know, that kind of stuff. I think you're totally right. I think that the every character kind of is the same thing because the creators nowadays are so afraid to put
flaws.
Bad traits or flaws or humanity. Really, humanity.
It's literally what what somebody's talking about. Like, anytime you see it, like if they have a character that's a person of color, they're afraid to give them any type of negative trait because they don't want to be called racist. Yeah. So they're going to be perfect, but the problem is perfect is boring. Right. Perfect isn't that interesting. Storytelling is not so linear and simple that you just say good guy good, bad guy bad. Yeah. The best characters have a little bit of both.
Complexity, yeah.
Well, they've completely watered down one of the main attributes and we see this. There's so many hero movies now. Even movies that aren't about superheroes are often about somebody doing something heroic. We've completely lost the part of the hero's journey where he's supposed to have a fatal flaw. Yeah. Like the fatal flaw is something like, oh well, he's an alcoholic. Oh well, he was asleep in ice for 80 years and doesn't know about modern stuff. Like,
I'll put it on the list.
We start looking at these lack of rounded characters, these two-dimensional characters who we're supposed to look at and accept and see as role models, but they're unrealistic.
Yeah. Right.
We need a character, we need a hero that does have a problem. A hero who maybe he is like misogynist or something.
I told you,
and this causes him to not trust a female character, and that causes him to lose something. Like, we need that in there.
I'm watching Veronica Mars, and every character of every race is casually just bad to other people all the time, and it's very interesting because, like, you look at that and you're like, I would never say that to another person in the real world, but everybody sort of has their flaws, and they're not all just the same good person all the time.
If you are creating a character, and I think that there's a lot of people that create characters now that really interject themselves into
it's all self-inserts.
So why would you ever admit to having the flaws that are socially taboo now? If you're inserting yourself, you could never conceptualize yourself as having that flaw if you're inserting yourself. I think there's a lot to that kind of, or this idea that we're bouncing off of each other.
There's a narcissism to it that every writer is like, my character needs to be an idealized version of me, and it doesn't.
Yeah. Because every character is, let's say I'm directing a movie, it's Dane Font's version of modernity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I pointed this out because I want you to realize that, look, Across the Spider-Verse is it's making way more than the original made. So also it's a weird argument for America because both The Little Mermaid and Into the Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse are doing great here in America, but I thought America was this racist hellhole. So which is it? Mm-hmm. Is it the rest of the world doesn't like these movies for this reason, like you're making in this article, or is it that America doesn't like it for this reason, like you're going to write in another article? Keep your insults for me in this country in line, and at least have some consistency with your argument, because it doesn't make any sense. What it proves is they want original stories with characters they actually like. This is a new story. This is a character people like. Nobody wanted what you did to The Little Mermaid to be done, and when you said that they couldn't object because if they did, they were a bad person, you guarantee that people are just going to push back on you. And what I find the most objectionable is the lack of intellectual honesty in the argument. If you want to say people don't like it for this reason, and then you say that you don't like the reasons people aren't liking it, if you want to say that because holding a candle or holding some type of candle for the original is stupid, fine. I think you're wrong, but at least it's a rational, realistic argument that people are actually making. What you're doing is you're taking every single person who has a problem with these things and you're turning them into some type of bland, one-note caricature of what you think they are, and it proves that you don't understand the average everyday moviegoer.
If people don't want to admit to flaws and stuff like that, I can't imagine how they could create a character that has flaws.
Yeah. I mean, just to add something in this. It just occurred to me. This is starting in the education system, by the way. I took some courses on screenwriting in college. And I'm not going to go and pretend that Penn State University is like the mecca of film screenwriting programs.
Doesn't matter.
It's not. But what I was told, I was writing a historical drama that took place in Wales in the early 1400s. And I was told that it wasn't that my character's dialogue was stilted. It wasn't that there wasn't enough backstory or the exposition went on too long. There were criticisms in there. Like, I was taking a class for a reason. I wasn't perfect. But I was told that if I wanted it to sell, I had to write in a black character, or I had to make one of the main characters have a gay relationship. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is a course I'm taking for my minor. My major was medieval studies. Yeah. I was pretty confident that there probably weren't a lot of what we would call today minority characters in Wales in the year 1400 participating in a rebellion against the English.
Sure thing, bigot.
And that's what it was. Is I was like, as the author of this story, authenticity is important to me.
They made Anne Boleyn black. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they're saying that but that's what I'm saying is they're saying authenticity doesn't sell. You've got to write what the studios want you to write.
They're right. The sad thing is they're right.
So, I know they are, but that's where I draw the line. Is I'm like, all right, well, if you're a writer, and I got some flack for this about the writer's strike comment I made yesterday, but if you're a writer and you have a story that nobody will buy, you need to put it online in some form or another.
Sorry, minor pushback. Authenticity sells. Authenticity doesn't get funded.
Yeah. Yes, true.
That's
good point. Good point.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.